talk about masking. I have just enough time to cover that. All right. So let's say on Baudelaire, I want his eyes and maybe his nose, but not all of him. Oops, I moved the wrong thing. All right, I am going to hide my other layer and hide the text to focus on this. Now, with a mask, right down here is the mask. You can apply a mask to a layer. If I click on here, notice how this is all white. This is the mask, and that's the original layer, okay? On the mask, what I can do is I can paint on the mask, and it will hide or reveal this current layer based on the color. Notice that's all white. If I got my paint bucket and I made it black, and I select that layer and I click on it, he goes away because black means entirely invisible. If I do a shade of gray, so I pick a gray, and I paint bucket it, what that does is it makes it partially visible, okay? Now, the cool thing about a layer mask is if I disable it, I still have my original image. Now, let me change this color down here to white so it's easier to see. Okay. We go back to our layer. Let's put it on normal. All right, notice when I disable the layer mask, I did not affect that layer at all. Now, if I enable it, notice how it's slightly darker. Well, I could get a paintbrush, and with pure white, I could brush. Oops, I did the wrong thing. I brushed on this layer. I did not mean to do that. I want to select that, so be careful that you're selecting the mask itself. Now, if I paint with white on the mask, hold on, let me get white. Notice how it totally reveals that picture there. Looks kind of weird, right? That's because the rest is gray. Now, what if I do it this way? I flip it so that it's all black, and I paint bucket it in. And I get my brush, and I brush all that out. Okay. We can't see him at all. Now what I can do is switch it to white and slowly brush in parts of that image. Okay, so what you're learning about here is if I want to just have his eyes and maybe part of his nose, okay, I can just brush in what I want. What's cool about this is if I make a mistake and I decide, wait, you know what, I don't want his nose, I can then switch it back to black and brush it back out. Now, the cool thing about a mask is I haven't affected my layer at all. Okay? All I've done is affected the mask. So if I disable it, it's still good. If I enable it, it's back. Now, if I apply my, hard light, and I bring back this layer, now just his eyes are showing through. There we go. So the mask is an awesome tool for doing adjustments on your picture. It's great for the effect of like cutting one picture out and putting it in another. If you cut out one picture and you need to clean it up a little bit, you can use the mask because the mask, you could ever edit that. You can always edit it and make changes to it. Okay, so that's the layer mask. It's called a vector mask, actually, technically speaking, and it works off a color. The other thing you might want to do on that is you can also do a gradient as well. So if you do a gradient of white to black and you make it radial, you can do the following. So it creates sort of a gradient where it's visible in the center but not beyond. So let's make that normal. You see that gradient, how that works? And then you apply it to stars and you get different effects. So that's layer styles. And the last thing is, I think I went over this, but just a reminder to delete. You just can click and drag it to delete. Or you can just hide it, which is a nice thing. If you don't want it, hide it. You may decide later on you want it back. Okay? So that's pretty much all I have to say about layers. The only thing I didn't cover was adjustment. Let me see what it's called. Oh, they call it a fill or adjustment layer. So if I want to adjust something about it, let's take the stars, for example. I select the layer, and I want to invert it. So it's kind of like working with the filter, but notice we're adjusting it right on the layer, and that can be redone. And this can work like the vector mask as well. So let's see what happens if we brush out or in some of that. So I paint it black, we get it normal. I get a brush and I paint in white. Wherever I paint, it will be inverted. So that's cool. It's like a combination of the vector mask plus whatever adjustment layer you do. And we've got all kinds of things. We want to do the brightness or contrast. Let me hide that. And again, it's the same sort of thing. Part of it you want it darker, whatever, you can brush it in right on here. You're going to have to kind of experiment with some of these. Black and white. If you want to make it all black and white, that's a great little adjustment you can do. Notice how we keep adding new layers every time we do it. So if you don't like the brightness contrast, you just delete it. You don't like the invert, delete it. You don't want it white and black, don't. Okay? So anyways, that's the adjustment or the fill layers. It lets you do a lot of other techniques as well. I hope that was beneficial.